All right, well, we are getting word now that the White House has indeed announced that Wednesday, December 5th, will be a national day of mourning in honor of the late President George Herbert Walker Bush. Flags at half-staff throughout the Capitol, including over the White House. A former White House press secretary under George W. Bush, the president's son from 2001 to 2003. What a raucous and historic period. Ari Fleischer joins us right now on the phone. Ari, maybe you can settle, I don't know if I'll call it a bet, but a curious point we've been bringing up with the likes of Dana Perino and all, the relationship between the father and the son, the president and of course, the guy you work for. That they sought each other's, opinions, but not counsel. What was it? What was that relationship like?
I've been with the President George W. Bush numerous times, including many times since he left the White House, where people have asked him about what advice did your father give you? And his answer always was the same. It was, he didn't give me advice, he gave me love. That when he would talk to his father as president, his father would just say to him, "You're doing great, and I want you to know I love you. You have my unrelenting love." And that is what President George W. Bush kept talking about. I never once, Neil, heard President George W. Bush say, "My father and I talked about Vladimir Putin, and he shared this insight," or "We talked about U.S. international relations in the Middle East, and he told me when he was there he did this or he did that." I never once heard George W. Bush talk like that, so I presume that was not the tenor of their conversations.
Real quickly, we do know how Bush Sr. felt about those around his son's administration. Donald Rumsfeld, to a lesser degree, Dick Cheney, was not a fan. What did you know about that?
Well, that's all true, and it showed that George W. Bush went his separate ways when it came to the personnel and the hiring. He was aware of that. George W. Bush was a very keen observer of his father's administration, and when he hired people, he wanted to learn lessons from who his father hired, and that guided him. And so I think when he hired some of those people, he knew his father didn't like them, but he was setting his own presidency, and that's how he did it.
Yeah, I always wondered, because he did that in his book, and did he telegraph his son he was going to say what he said in that book? Did
George H.W. Bush telegraph his son?
Yeah.
Or did... I don't know the answer to that. Clearly, the two didn't have an identical worldview. In the 2000 campaign, people would always say to George W. Bush reporters, "What's the difference between you and your father?" And George W. Bush would answer, "I'm more conservative." So, naturally, there's never going to be two people who are carbon copies of each other. Where they are carbon copies, though, is their graciousness. George H.W. Bush didn't instill in his children that sense of old-fashioned decency, good manners, and treating people well. And I saw that in his son, and I saw it in George H.W. Bush.
Well put, Ari. Thank you for taking the time, my friend. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Neil.
Ari Fleischer.